1. I'm posting this from a throwaway account, as this is something that has ruined my life before. This is honestly hard to type and to talk about, as I've been suffering from PTSD from these experiences. When I was around 11, 12, I started waking up with memories of being up in a ship, seeing aliens, the typical greys. I had been fascinated with aliens all my upbringing, and thought my memories of them were awesome. I told people at school, but the teasing and bullying got so bad I eventually had to change schools. When I told my mum, all I got was a simple, "Aha, that's nice." My parents were separated, so I only saw my dad rarely, but that year when I saw him, I started talking about it, and that's where a lot of things started to fall apart. He was a huge Jesus freak, and immediately started getting mad at me for talking about that stupid alien shit again. And as he berated me for past events, he brought up a bunch of times in the past that I had talked about aliens, said I had an alien friend, or times I had been with them. Up until then I had no recollection, but as soon as he started talking about the instances, I remembered them. One of the things he brought up was when we got a shirt with aliens on it a few years ago, I had talked a bunch about them. I distinctly remembered the shirt, just not talking about the aliens. During that time, I ended up at my grandma's, who I stayed with a lot as a child, up until I was around 5. I brought up that I thought I had been abducted, and she laughed, mentioning that I was talking about that again. I asked her what she meant, and she told me that when I was little, I would scream and fuss, and refuse to sleep in my room, that I wanted to sleep in the living room so the aliens could take me away, so that I could go with them. They didn't see the harm, so they'd let me, and I'd fall asleep no problem. Again, once told about these events, I started to remember them. This started to really scare me. If my dad and grandma were tinfoil hat types, I would question them, but they both adamantly disbelieve in aliens because they're not in the Bible, and would never play along to such things. The fact that it had been a continuous thing all my life, with memories I had clearly repressed, was terrifying. I started to go back and really think on my life, and worked on remembering things. I remembered being terrified to be exposed out of the blanket, but would eventually leave some parts out, thinking, if they want to study my arm, they can study my arm. And I would wake up with odd, thin cuts on whatever part I left out. The most damning, though, was remembering frequently going to the vacant lot next to my house, looking for UFO landing prints. After all this, I was obviously very certain of my experiences, and very vocal about it. I ended up having to see a psychiatrist and a psychologist. The psychiatrist diagnosed me as schizotypal, but the psychologist vetoed it, saying that anyone who believes in God could qualify, and given the amount of reported alien abductions, it wasn't his place to say it never happened. During my times of talking about these things, I met someone who knew a lot about aliens and psychic phenomena. For the next couple of years, I found myself down a crazy rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. I had also been able to perform some psychic tricks, mind reading, remote viewing, telepathy, all verified by people who did not believe me. You're probably thinking this is ridiculous. So does everyone else. Life's really fucking weird when you know aliens and psychic stuff exist, and anyone you talk to thinks you're crazy. So I just stopped talking about it. Stopped telling people. Tried really fucking hard to tell myself it was all just a dream, psychic shit doesn't exist, I'm crazy. But the more I told myself I was crazy, and that psychic stuff didn't exist, the more I lost my ability to do things with it. You tell yourself that the thing you saw was a hallucination, that the person who witnessed it was humouring you. You drive yourself crazy when you call yourself insane. For me to accept that aliens don't exist, and I wasn't abducted, is to accept that large parts of my life that have been confirmed by non-believers never happened. I haven't told anyone about it in about 5 years. I'm terrified of large open spaces away from people at night, and if I watch movies or things with realistic aliens, it sometimes triggers panic attacks. I thought I had a good handle on things, until XCOM came out in 2012. All my friends were playing it, so I jumped on too, thinking that the alien thing was behind me. Pretty much non-stop, I was having nightmares and waking up paralysed and terrified. It happened so often, I had to tell my girlfriend the truth and stop playing. She was the last person I ever told. We broke up a few years ago, and I have no intentions of telling my current girlfriend unless it becomes absolutely necessary. As for how I got the aliens to stop taking me away, one night I built up the courage, meditated for a while, focused hard, and simply asked them to stop taking me away, that it was disruptive and ruining my life. I haven't seen them at all since then. 2. In my junior year in college, I had a strange experience. First, a few details. My dorm room was attached to my roommate's, so that I had to go out to hers to get to the bathroom or the hallway. She was a light sleeper, but I wasn't the type to be out late, so it didn't matter. I had 2 normal operations in my life at that time, and discovered that while under anaesthesia, I would wake up briefly toward the end before I'm supposed to. Also, if I get a mosquito bite, I have to deal with it for at least a month. I'm not a fast healer. One night, I had the most vivid dream of my life. I woke up briefly somewhere else, and then I went right back to sleep. In this dream, I looked left, I looked right, and then passed back out, just like if I was in surgery. I was on a hospital gurney, slightly inclined, facing the wall. There was ambient noise behind me, and the echoes suggested it was a very large room. On either side of me was a row of empty hospital gurneys. At my feet, just to my right, 2 people were having a conversation, sitting on a bench against the wall. One was a person in a dark suit. The other was... I don't know what it was. It was small, and I saw its hands, which appeared to have darker skin, greyish. They were speaking together so animated and excited, like 2 old friends who hadn't seen each other in years, and they didn't notice me wake up. I didn't recognise the language, and even though I don't speak German, Mandarin, Russian, etc., I know how to recognise them when I hear them. This language was wholly unrecognisable, yet the person in the suit seemed fluent. It was then that I went back to sleep. In the morning I said, "Well, that was a messed up dream," and went to the shower. As I passed my roommate, who was still in bed, she asked, "Where did you go last night?" I thought that was odd, and something unnerved me about it. After my shower, I started to put my makeup on, and noticed something on my face. I leaned closer, and couldn't believe what I saw. 2 perfectly parallel lines, impossibly thin, impossibly perfect. There was some clear, hard gel on the top, and that's what I felt. There was no blood. My own hair was thicker than the width of the cuts, yet I could see down into my skin a little ways. This was 1996. I had never seen anything like this. These days I would say it was a laser cut, topped with liquid Band-Aid, but neither of those things were prevalent in those days. I said to myself, okay, there's an explanation. I slept on a staple or a paperclip. I do homework in my bed all the time. I went and scoured my pillow for anything sharp. I found nothing, so I got my sewing needle, a staple from some homework, and a paperclip. I dunked them in hydrogen peroxide and made cuts on my face, similar to what was there. Immediately, blood welled up, and the skin was jagged for all 3 objects, and the width of all cuts were thicker than the laser cuts. I determined that nothing in my room could have made the cuts. I skipped my first class as I tried to figure out what to do. I kept obsessively feeling my face all day, in awe of the perfection of what was there, and how it could have come to be there. There were only 2 people on campus rich enough to have a new digital camera, which meant I would have to borrow a friend's 35mm because I didn't have my own. That meant I would have to explain myself to my friend, and possibly the Photoshop when the pictures came back. Who would I even give the photos to? Who would I even contact? And what would I tell them? In those days, if you even said the word alien, you were a pariah. After hours of mental debate sitting on the edge of my bed, I gave up thinking about it and finished my classes for the day. I sat on the edge of my bed into the night, debating, unsure of what to do. In the early hours of the morning, I woke up. The cuts were gone, completely healed, no trace of even a scar. I was disturbed for a few days, but then I eventually forgot about it. A few years after graduating, I decided I was going to have some dental work done, and I went to 2 different offices to get quotes. They both took a full facial x-ray. I'd long since forgotten my crazy dream and the cuts, until I sat down across from the first x-ray technician and pointed to a strange thing showing up above my teeth. I asked if I was looking at a mirror image, because it was on the same side as my cuts had been, rather than the opposite side of it. No, I was told the x-ray was an actual, not a mirror image, so the right side of the image corresponded with the right side of my face. I pointed to the almost square image above my teeth and asked what it was. "It's just an x-ray anomaly." He didn't seem bothered by it. I figured that meant there was some damage or irregularity with the x-ray plates, and so I let it go. Then I went to the second dentist and had another x-ray done. You guessed it. The square was there, in the exact same place. This time I didn't even try to make polite small talk or beat around the bush. I pointed to the square and said, "What is that?" This time the tech looked at me funny and said, "It's an X-ray anomaly." Then she leaned closer to me and whispered, "We see them all the time," in a way that gave me goosebumps. I didn't know what else to say, so I said nothing. Could it be that whatever negatives or plates or whatever they used for an X-ray were damaged in exactly the same spot, in exactly the same shape? Maybe, I guess. I don't know much about X-rays. After that, I had to reflect on my situation. I don't feel freaked out, but I think there might be something in my face put there by somebody else. Here's what I know. We do this all the time to other species. We chase them in helicopters, shoot at them with tranquilizer darts, take rectal temperature, blood samples, stamp radio tags in their ear with no regard to if it hurts, or the trauma of the event, or if their furry buddies will ostracize them later because they've had something funky on their ear. In my situation, I was clearly well cared for, if it really happened at all. Someone was there as some kind of representative on my behalf. I was handled in such a way that if I didn't have a weird metabolism, I wouldn't have known what even happened. I never even once felt pain. My cut healed instantly. If this is some kind of research-driven radio tag for the purposes of data collection, preservation of habitat or species like we would do, they did it with far more regard for me than we have for other species on our own planet. I don't know what might happen if I get another X-ray 20 years later. I've tried to look when I go through airport security if anything shows up on the image we see in the booth, but I don't see anything. Strangely, I'm okay with this. I think it might just be science, nothing nefarious or evil. I wish my consent had been asked first, but I suppose it's hard to ask for consent when you're not even supposed to exist. 3. In the 90s, my family lived in a coastal city in Saudi Arabia. My parents were doing up the flat we lived in, so my brother and I had to sleep on the same king-size bed for a week or so. I was probably around 10 years old, and my brother was 13. One night my brother started shaking my shoulder, trying to wake me up, saying, "Yamik, Yamik, do you see this too?" I don't know what the time was, but it was dark. I was under my duvet, and had no idea what he was talking about. I opened my eyes and saw this featureless, lanky, tall person made of a dim light. It was standing by my brother's side of the bed. Before I could process what was happening, it extended its neck over to the middle of the bed between my brother and I, before disintegrating into tiny lights across the room with a massive static sound. My brother and I screamed and hid under our duvets. The next thing I know, I wake up in the morning at the exact same time as my brother, and we just look at each other and run out of the room. We've talked about this incident a few times over the years, and we still don't know what happened. A mutual shared episode of sleep paralysis? Monoxide? We had our windows open. The flat was ventilated properly. My parents don't remember hearing any unusual sounds. They slept soundly in their room. I asked my brother when he noticed this thing as he woke me up. He remembers waking up to a glow in the room, opening his eyes and seeing this thing of light walking up to his side of the bed, and just standing there with a soft humming sound coming out of it. He thought he was dreaming, so he tried to ignore it and turned to his other side. He looked back after a while, and it was still there, so he decided to wake me up. I have no idea what to make of this incident. I'm over 35 years old now. I've had a few incidents over the years that I can't quite explain, but nothing to this extent. 4. I'm not sure if this is relevant to this subreddit, and I've wanted to share this for a while but never found the place. A recent thread here prompted me to share this. I don't believe this was sent to me or anything. It was just a dream, but when I woke up it seemed to make a lot of sense. I spent a lot of time trying to lucid dream when I was younger, and I've always been into things like meditation and such. Just as a preface, I've been following and studying UAP stuff for years. I don't believe in a big bad conspiracy, but I believe there are things in our skies we cannot explain. This was very vivid, and still is today, hence me recalling this for you. But don't take this as gospel. I have a very vivid imagination. I write and make games, so this could all just come from my mind. So, my dream doesn't really have much visual structure. I remember blue and purple lights, slowly pulsing down corridors, subdivided and smooth. The floors would smoothly slope upwards to the walls, and the same with the ceiling, like being in a cave. The whole place was one piece, and there were no right angles. My recollection is hazy, as though I was stumbling around these halls. I was just moving down these halls, and was being told things, but not out loud, more like telepathically. So, I was told the following. They, whoever they are, reached a point where they could no longer advance technologically due to a lack of understanding. There seemed to be a point where innovation just stopped for their civilization. To get around this, they started playing with genetics. A master plan was put into action. They manufactured new versions of themselves with bigger brains. From here on, I'm going to call them lab babies. They were raising the bigger brain with some form of indoctrination, a kind of religion of science. They were set up from a young age to work on scientific projects, basically using them as powerhouses to speed up their race's technological advancement. They were applied to a lot of different areas of study. They got better and better at breeding versions of themselves with bigger brains, to the extent that they could add new parts to these lab baby brains to grant them new cognitive functions. They told me they are most proud of the telepathic functions they built on. So, they found that there came a point where the lab babies were so smart that they would just kill themselves. I remember writing intelligence equals suicide in my old notes, but it was never explained why. To get around this, they decided to grow very, very large brains, basically equipped with appropriate life support. The lab babies would communicate with these large brains via telepathy, and would use them as conscious databanks. They'd give the brains a problem to solve, and between them they would figure it out, and give something to the drones to try. This method catapulted their technology into overdrive. There was something about the big brains having a whole different kind of perception of this reality, which helped them find their way around issues that they would have never seen. They have an entire spectrum of genetically modified offspring now. Some of these offspring are mixed race, but they still have a pure contingent far away. These have not been genetically altered at all, and live simply to preserve the base of the species. They are very far away. I was sort of told that they are involved with a lot of other races. Their craft are designed with stealth in mind. They are operated via consciousness control, a telepathic link to the technology on board. This is to prevent other races from interacting with their technology should it fall into the wrong hands. They are weaponized with some sort of radiation pulse that can lay down waves of radiation from afar, but I was also sort of shown how they can use their craft to literally fly right through objects to destroy them, due to the gravitational distortion field they have around the craft. This method of attack does no damage to the craft. They've been here almost longer than us. They have bases under the ocean floors in various places. They said something about having some kind of sonic repellent near the entrances of these places to deter sea life, as they had an issue with large animals being sucked into their installations due to differential pressure. They are fully nuclear. Everything is nuclear powered in some way. They are concerned that we have our own nuclear theory. We have the means but not the tools, or something along those lines. We are binary thinkers, i.e. something is or it isn't. But with them it's like they aren't a threat and they are at the same time. I remember being confused by this. The best way I could describe it is like having an argument with a spouse. You're locked into the disagreement, but it won't change the status of the relationship. Some of us are like, oh, they're a threat, and others are, oh, they're peaceful. It's more of a grey area. They are both for and against us. They explain that this is why they don't appear to do much, because they are naturally unbiased and passive. It's hard to describe. They left me with something like, we have learnt how to say hello. They said something along the lines of, if our pilots see them, we can flash our lights and they will respond by flashing lights back. Hand-waving is as far as they are willing to go with us at this time. Take from this what you will. I thought it might be of interest, even if it was just a weird dream. 5. No one will believe this, but it is true, and I've spent 2 years in a mental health institution for it. Back in 1989, my sister was dating a creep that was almost 10 years her senior. She was 17. A real asshole that would bring gifts to my parents and act all nice, but then beat me any chance he could get for no reason. I was a quiet kid who loved reading comics and dinosaurs. So, it's autumn, and he illegally drove the 3 of us out to Palomar Observatory. As my sister and him made out in the truck listening to Meatloaf, I was on the truck bed with my binoculars, looking at the range and the stars. Then, the volume of the music suddenly increased to ear-splitting levels, but instead of music it was the sound of white noise, and a loud crack. Then, everything went dark. My sister was screaming, and the white noise continued as I was frozen with fear, petrified. The stars were gone. The moon. The range was nowhere to be seen. There was just absolute darkness. Then I woke up. Or so I thought, as I caught myself picking up my binoculars at home and having my sister telling me to hurry up. Before I knew what I was doing, I realised we were on the way to the observatory. Somehow, I'd gone back in time. I don't know how, but I pleaded with them to go home. Obviously the lovely boyfriend told me to shut the fuck up, and it happened again. The noise, the crack, the darkness, and again I was at home getting my binoculars. This event happened exactly 8 times, and every time I sat still and cried with fear. The last time it happened, I was found at the roadside with scratches all over my body, the boyfriend dead at the observatory, and my sister missing. I told everyone everything. I had to. I was 7 years old, and from 1993 to 95 I was living in a mental institution out in Massachusetts, away from everyone I knew. The staff would laugh at me about how I was a Terminator sent back from the future to tell lies. In the winter of 95, my father made it so I could go home and return to school. I never saw my sister again. And the stories end there. If you enjoyed the content, please make sure to like, comment to tell us what your favourite story was, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, in the depths of space, there's always another story to be told.